Maple Ridge was the kind of neighborhood where everything looked perfect. The hedges were trimmed with military precision, driveways gleamed under the streetlights, and the HOA meetings were filled with smiles that never reached anyone's eyes. Behind every manicured lawn was a competition, quiet, ruthless, and disguised as community spirit. At the center of it all was David Hensley, the long-standing HOA president. To the residents, he was the model of order and discipline. He knew every rule, every policy, every violation that dared to appear on his watch. But beneath that polished exterior lived a man who believed control was the same as respect, and losing either was a threat to everything he'd built. That threat came in the form of Ethan Cole, a new homeowner with sharp instincts and a reputation for seeing through facades. Ethan was the kind of man who noticed things: missing funds from maintenance budgets, irregular billing on HOA dues, unapproved expenses under community improvements. When he began asking questions, David smiled through clenched teeth, assuring everyone there was nothing to worry about. But inside, something dark began to stir. For years, David had ruled Maple Ridge through quiet fear. He knew how to make people comply: late fees, warnings, code violations that appeared mysteriously after disagreements. But Ethan didn't scare easily. He started gathering evidence, calling for transparency, even organizing homeowners to demand an audit. Each passing week, David could feel the walls closing in, the whispers at meetings, the cautious glances, the hint of rebellion. And though his neighbors still waved politely, he could feel something shifting, the power slipping from his hands. Then came that evening, the night the lights went out. It began with rain, steady, cold, tapping against windows like a countdown. David sat in his study, staring at the HOA financial reports he had doctored months ago. His mind ran through the possibilities. If Ethan succeeded in exposing him, it wouldn't just be a loss of position, it would be humiliation, ruin. And David Hensley could not be humiliated. He'd spent years building the illusion of perfection. To lose it now to someone like Ethan was unthinkable. So he decided to remind Ethan who really held the power in Maple Ridge. At first, the plan was simple, subtle: a code enforcement letter, a fine, a fabricated complaint about yard maintenance. But those small acts didn't satisfy the growing bitterness inside him. Ethan ignored them all, confident and composed, as though he could see right through David's games. That composure drove David mad. And one night, as the storm outside began to roar, David's thoughts turned darker. In the HOA maintenance room, tucked away behind the clubhouse, was a panel only he had access to. It controlled the electrical supply for several of the community's older buildings, including the row where Ethan lived. It wasn't supposed to be tampered with, but David knew the system inside out. He told himself it wasn't personal, just a reminder, just enough to make Ethan uncomfortable, maybe scare him into silence. The rain masked his footsteps as he crossed the courtyard, keys jingling softly in his hand. The maintenance room door creaked open and the smell of damp concrete filled the air. Lightning flashed through the small window, illuminating the breaker panel. For a long moment, David just stared at it, at the labeled switches, the silent hum of power flowing through the circuits. Then, without a word, he flipped the breaker marked Building 4. The neighborhood continued to glow in warm light except for one darkened stretch at the end of the street, Ethan's building. The storm thundered overhead and David stood still, watching the lights vanish one by one. It was strangely satisfying seeing that corner of Maple Ridge swallowed by darkness. He waited there for a few minutes, listening. No alarms, no calls, just rain. He left the maintenance room quietly and returned to his home where his wife was asleep, unaware of the act her husband had just committed. But something shifted in that moment. For David, the darkness he created wasn't just outside, it had taken root inside him. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with talk of the outage. Some said a transformer blew, others thought it was storm damage. Only David knew the truth, and he smiled politely through every conversation, pretending to share their concern. But Ethan wasn't convinced. He'd lived through plenty of storms, and none had ever caused an outage limited to his building. He began asking questions again, first to neighbors, then to the HOA maintenance staff. They had no answers. Only David did, and he was careful to keep it that way. Days passed, the power returned, and life in Maple Ridge seemed to settle. But Ethan's persistence grew. He filed a formal complaint to the HOA board demanding an investigation. He even hinted at involving local authorities if he didn't get transparency. David could feel his calm slipping. He started losing sleep. Every flicker of light, every sudden noise made him tense. It was as if the darkness he unleashed that night had followed him home. Then came the letter. A notice addressed to the HOA board from an independent auditor confirming that Ethan had requested a full financial review. The audit would expose everything: the altered numbers, the missing funds, the misused HOA resources. David's hands trembled as he read it. That night, sitting alone in his study, he began to justify everything. He told himself Ethan wasn't just challenging him, he was trying to destroy the order of Maple Ridge. The community needed discipline, rules, control. Without him, everything would fall apart. And so, his mind began to twist the truth into something righteous. He convinced himself he wasn't the villain. He was protecting the neighborhood from chaos, from arrogance, from Ethan's rebellion. But power doesn't just corrupt, it consumes. As the days passed, David's paranoia deepened. He started checking the neighborhood security cameras late at night, watching for signs that Ethan was plotting against him. He noticed Ethan meeting quietly with other homeowners, whispers, papers being exchanged. David began to feel surrounded, trapped. And then, something strange started happening around his own house. His outdoor lights flickered randomly, his sprinklers turned on in the middle of the night, and one morning he found a small note under his windshield that simply read, "You can't hide forever." It wasn't signed. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself it was just Ethan playing games, but deep down, a seed of fear began to grow. Because David knew what he had done, and he knew someone must have seen him that night. One afternoon, during a community event, Ethan approached him with that same calm, unreadable expression. David forced a smile. But something in Ethan's eyes made his chest tighten. There was no anger there, just certainty, as if Ethan already knew the truth. That night, David drove to the maintenance room again. The storm had returned, almost identical to the one before. His hands shook as he turned the key, heart pounding. He checked the panels, scanning the switches. Everything was normal until he noticed something new. A small sticky note had been placed on the breaker for Building 4. Written in black ink, just 2 words, "Nice try." He froze, the sound of thunder swallowed his breath. Someone had been here, someone new. Panic spread through him like wildfire. He ripped the note down and tore it into pieces, his mind spiraling. How long had it been there? Who left it? Was Ethan watching him right now? He slammed the panel shut and stumbled outside, his shoes splashing in the puddles. The rain poured harder, blurring his vision, but he thought he saw a figure across the courtyard, standing still, half hidden in the shadows, watching. David's heart raced, he blinked and the figure was gone. The next morning he tried to act normal, but paranoia clung to him like fog. He checked his doors twice, changed his passwords, even installed cameras around his property. He was certain Ethan was planning something, but the problem with paranoia is that it turns every sound into proof, every silence into accusation. And when guilt meets fear, it breeds desperation. David's desperation grew unbearable. He couldn't focus, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying that stormy night in his mind. The way the lights went out, the thrill, the silence. And then the note. Those 2 words haunted him more than the act itself. Nice try. It wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Someone was turning his own tactics against him. And for the first time, David felt powerless. By the end of that week, his composure was gone. His once perfectly groomed yard looked neglected. His smile at HOA meetings was forced, twitching at the edges. People began to notice. The man who once controlled everything now seemed like he was barely holding himself together. Still, he couldn't stop obsessing. He spent hours watching the security feeds, frame by frame, searching for clues. And one night he found something, a shadow moving near the maintenance room around midnight. The figure wore a hood, face obscured, but something about the way they walked, the calmness of it, made David certain it was Ethan. He slammed his fist on the desk. This wasn't over. That night, David decided he would confront Ethan directly, not through rules or letters, but through fear. The same fear he once commanded so easily. He didn't know exactly how he'd do it yet, but one thing was certain: Ethan would regret ever crossing him. What David didn't realize was that Ethan wasn't the one in danger anymore. Because when you play with power long enough, eventually the darkness you unleash finds its way back to you. And that realization would come sooner than he ever expected. As the clock struck midnight, David sat by his window, watching the rain begin again. In the reflection, for just a split second, he thought he saw someone standing behind him, just a shape, a shadow, gone as quickly as it appeared. But when he turned around, the room was empty. Still, the feeling lingered, the sense that someone was watching, waiting. And as the thunder rolled across Maple Ridge once more, David realized the same darkness he once controlled had begun to control him. The lights flickered once, twice. Then everything went dark. The blackout lasted only seconds, but to David it felt like an eternity. The darkness pressed against his skin, thick and suffocating, until the lights finally blinked back to life. His heart pounded, his palms slick with sweat. He told himself it was just the storm, just a surge, but deep down he knew better. Something or someone was sending him a message. For the rest of the night, sleep refused to come. He sat by the window, staring out at the glistening pavement of Maple Ridge, watching the streetlights flicker like dying candles. The houses across the road glowed warm and secure, but to David they looked like eyes, dozens of quiet, judging eyes that knew exactly what he'd done. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The neighborhood looked calm again, washed clean by the rain, but David's mind wasn't calm. He felt frayed, stretched thin, a man held together only by habit. He went through the motions, shaving, dressing, walking out to get the paper, but his reflection in the glass door startled him. The confident president of Maple Ridge was gone. What looked back was pale, hollow-eyed, and scared. That morning, an emergency HOA board meeting was called, not by him, by Ethan. The message had gone out late the night before while David sat in the dark. The subject line was simple: transparency meeting, urgent. When David arrived at the clubhouse, the atmosphere felt different. The air buzzed with whispers and tension. He could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable, eyes turning toward Ethan now, not him. Ethan stood at the head of the table, calm as always, a stack of documents in front of him. David's seat, the seat of authority, felt smaller that morning. As Ethan spoke, David's stomach tightened. Words like audit results, financial discrepancies, and unauthorized access filled the room. The board listened, leaning in. David tried to maintain his composure, nodding, smiling faintly, pretending to follow the conversation. But inside, every word felt like a nail being driven into his coffin. When Ethan presented a printed report detailing thousands in unexplained maintenance expenses, David's pulse spiked. He could feel the walls closing in again, the eyes of the board burning into him. And then Ethan said something that froze him entirely. "According to the system logs," he said, voice even, "someone accessed the maintenance control room during the night of the blackout." David's throat went dry. Ethan looked around the room, pausing just long enough for the tension to settle. Then he added, "The timestamp shows 11:42, the master keycard was used." Silence. David's mind screamed. The master keycard, his keycard, was supposed to be untraceable. Only a few had access to that record, and none of them should have been able to retrieve it. He managed to force a small chuckle, shaking his head like it was nothing, but he could feel the blood draining from his face. He muttered something about system errors, about outdated software, about how these logs can be unreliable. But no one spoke in his defense. For the first time in years, the room was quiet when David spoke, and that silence told him everything. After the meeting, he walked out into the sun, but it didn't feel warm. It felt harsh, exposing. His hands trembled as he reached his car, keys jingling like nervous whispers. He sat behind the wheel, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He was losing control. That night, he poured himself a drink, then another. He tried to think, to plan, but his thoughts were scattered and sharp, cutting into him. Every plan he made unraveled before it began. Ethan had evidence. The board was turning, his spotless reputation, his power was slipping through his fingers. Then his phone buzzed. An unknown number, no message, just a photo. The maintenance room, the breaker panel, and there, clearly visible in the photo, was David's hand on the switch. His glass shattered against the floor. He stared at the image, his heart hammering, nausea rising in his throat. It couldn't be real, it couldn't, but it was. Someone had been watching him that night. Someone had followed him into that room. And now they had proof. David sat motionless for minutes, mind blank, the phone screen glowing like a confession. Then it vibrated again, a single text this time. "Do you remember the dark, David?" He dropped the phone, breath quickening. He could hear the storm outside again, though the sky was clear, the sound of rain in his head pounding relentless. He thought of Ethan immediately, but something in the tone felt different, more intimate, more calculated. Ethan wouldn't send something like that. Ethan was too measured, too composed. So who was it? He went through possibilities: disgruntled residents, board members loyal to Ethan, maybe someone he'd wronged in the past. The list was long. David had made many enemies while pretending to keep order. But whoever it was, they wanted him scared, and it was working. The next few days were a blur of paranoia. He barely ate, barely slept. He started noticing strange things: a car parked outside his home longer than usual, the feeling of being followed at the grocery store, footsteps behind him that vanished when he turned. His wife asked if he was all right. He lied, telling her it was just stress from the HOA nonsense. But every night the phone buzzed again. No number, no name, just messages. Lights out, President. You made the wrong enemy. Soon everyone will know. Each one came at the same time, 11:42 p.m., the exact minute he'd cut Ethan's power. By the third night, David snapped. He drove straight to Ethan's house, parked a few houses down, and sat there watching the lights. Ethan's home glowed warmly, his wife laughing, his dog curled near the door, peace radiating from every window. It infuriated David. He told himself he was there to confront Ethan, to end it. But he never got out of the car. He just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, whispering to himself that he hadn't done anything wrong, that it was just a blackout, just a mistake. But guilt doesn't fade when you talk over it, it festers. The next morning the messages changed. This time they weren't threats, they were instructions. If you want this to stop, meet me. Attached was a location, the clubhouse, midnight. David's stomach twisted. It was madness to go, but what choice did he have? Whoever this was, they had proof, photographs, timestamps, everything that could destroy him. He couldn't let that happen. At midnight he arrived. The clubhouse loomed dark and silent, its reflection rippling in the puddles from a light drizzle. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with damp wood and cleaning chemicals. He called out, but no one answered. His footsteps echoed as he moved deeper into the main hall where the HOA meetings were held. The chairs were stacked, the tables folded. Only one light was on, a small lamp in the corner casting a circle of faint yellow. On the table beneath it lay a folder. He hesitated, then stepped closer. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Him entering the maintenance room, flipping the breaker, walking back into the rain, every frame sharp, incriminating. His breathing quickened as he turned through them. At the back of the folder was a note written in black marker. Confess or lose everything. His hand trembled. Then he noticed something else beneath the folder, a small black USB drive. He pocketed it, gathered the photos, and left quickly, locking the door behind him. His mind raced the entire drive home. Confess to who? Ethan, the board, the police. He poured another drink, plugged in the USB drive, and waited for the files to load. At first, it was just a series of images, his own face, captured through what looked like security footage from multiple angles. But then the screen flickered and a video started playing. The same footage, but now a voice, distorted, unrecognizable. You thought you controlled the power, David, but the real power was never yours. He froze. The voice was Ethan. It was deeper, slower, almost mechanical. The video ended abruptly, leaving only static. David sat there for a long time, the glow of the monitor washing over his pale face. Whoever was doing this wasn't just blackmailing him, they were playing with him, studying his reactions. That night he dreamed of darkness, of standing in that maintenance room, surrounded by humming lights, unable to find the switch that would bring everything back. When he woke, his phone was ringing. It was the vice president of the HOA, Karen Simmons. Her voice trembled. David, something happened. She told him Ethan was in the hospital. David's heart stopped. According to her, Ethan had been found unconscious near the clubhouse early that morning, injuries suggesting he'd fallen or been pushed down the maintenance stairwell. The police were already involved. David's mind raced through possibilities. He hadn't seen Ethan, he hadn't touched him, but who had? And why near the maintenance room? His thoughts spiraled into panic. If Ethan died, everything might vanish with him, the accusations, the audit, but if he survived, the truth might come out faster than ever. David didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. He sat in silence, staring out the window as police cars pulled into the neighborhood hours later. Residents gathered outside, whispering, the illusion of Maple Ridge perfect lawns, perfect lives was cracking. And David knew the darkness he had unleashed had finally broken free of his control. That evening, as he stood by his window, watching the red and blue lights fade into the distance, his phone buzzed one last time. A single text. Now it's your turn to lose power. And before he could even react, his house went dark. When the lights went out this time, it wasn't like before. The silence that followed was thicker, heavier, almost deliberate. David stood frozen in his living room, phone in hand, the blue glow of the screen the only light left. Outside, Maple Ridge lay under a soft drizzle, the kind of quiet that comes after sirens fade and neighbors retreat behind closed doors. But inside David's house, that quiet was suffocating. He stared out the window. Every other home on the street glowed gently, porches, kitchen windows, bedroom lamps. Only his house was dark. His hands trembled as he reached for the fuse box. Everything looked fine. The switches were up, the circuits untouched, but the power was gone. And on the wall, drawn in what looked like thick black marker, were words that hadn't been there before. You took his light, now yours is mine. David stumbled back, the message blurring as panic flooded his vision. He dropped the flashlight, the beam rolling across the floor. The walls seemed to close in on him, the air electric with dread. He tried to rationalize it. Someone had broken in. Someone was toying with him. It had to be Ethan. Maybe Ethan wasn't in the hospital at all. Maybe it was all a setup to make him break, to push him into confessing. But then the phone rang again. This time the caller ID read private. He hesitated, then answered, silence. Who is this? He demanded, his voice cracking. Nothing, just faint static, and then beneath it a whisper, distorted, low, and unrecognizable. You can't hide in the dark, David. The line clicked dead. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the rain. Then he ran to the window again. Across the street, a single figure stood under a streetlight, tall, motionless, watching. The glow from the lamp cast no shadow beneath them. David's pulse spiked. He shouted, but no one answered. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there. Then, as lightning flashed overhead, the light flickered, and the figure was gone. By morning, David looked like a ghost himself. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. His wife had left to stay with her sister after the power cut, frightened by his erratic behavior. Alone in that house, David began to unravel. The police came by mid-morning, asking questions about Ethan's fall. They wanted to know if David had seen him that night or if he'd noticed anything strange near the clubhouse. David forced calm, shaking his head, answering in clipped, careful sentences. But when they asked where he'd been around midnight, he hesitated. That pause was all it took. The officer's eyes narrowed slightly, nodding it down. When they left, David felt the world shrinking around him. Every neighbor's glance felt like judgment, every whisper an accusation. Later that afternoon, he decided to check the clubhouse himself. He had to see it to understand what really happened. The police tape fluttered weakly in the breeze as he slipped under it, ignoring the warning signs. The maintenance stairwell smelled of damp metal and concrete. He looked down into the narrow space where Ethan had fallen. The shadows seemed deeper than they should have been. He stared at the floor for a long time, the image of Ethan's body flashing in his mind even though he hadn't seen it. Then something caught his eye, a faint scratch on the wall near the panel. He moved closer, squinting. Carved into the paint, just barely visible, were 3 letters, DH. His initials. He staggered back, chest tightening. His knees hit the concrete. It wasn't possible he hadn't written that. But someone wanted it to look like he had. By evening, his paranoia was a living thing. He started packing the house, talking to himself, replaying every moment of that night in the rain. He'd gone to the maintenance room, yes, but no one could have seen him. It was empty. It was silent. Unless someone had been inside before him. The thought hit like lightning. What if this wasn't about Ethan at all? What if someone else had planned the entire thing using Ethan's investigation as cover? He opened his laptop, digging into the HOA records again. As he scrolled through old access logs, something strange caught his attention. The maintenance keycard had been used twice that night, once at 11:42 and again at 11:59. He froze. He only flipped the breaker once. Who used it again? He dug deeper, pulling timestamps, cross-checking entry cameras. One video feed, camera 3, facing the east walkway, had been corrupted. Static. The same glitch that had appeared on the USB video. Someone had tampered with the system. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't just being framed, he was being hunted. And whoever it was knew exactly how to manipulate power, cameras, and fear. That night, unable to bear the silence, he poured another drink and sat by the window again. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled faintly in the distance. He stared at the empty street, waiting for the figure to return. Then his phone buzzed. A new message, this time a video. He opened it. The footage was from inside his house, his study. The camera panned slowly across his desk, his papers, his glass ending on the window where he now sat. Then the camera turned toward him. He gasped, spinning around, but no one was there. He looked back at the screen. The video ended. David's heart hammered as realization dawned. Whoever this was, they were inside his home. He tore through the house, checking every door, every room, every shadow. Nothing, but as he returned to the study, he noticed the window latch was open, rainwater on the sill. He slammed it shut, backed away, and sank to the floor. His breath came in short bursts. He didn't know what to believe anymore. His phone buzzed one last time that night. "You turned off the wrong power, David. The real current runs deeper." The message made no sense, but it chilled him to the bone. He sat there until morning, exhausted, hollow, staring at the message until the screen dimmed. At dawn, a knock echoed through the house, sharp, demanding. He opened the door to find the police again, this time with a warrant. They'd found something new in the clubhouse, security footage showing David entering the maintenance room the night of the blackout. The footage matched the photos in the folder. He tried to explain, to tell them it was all manipulated, that someone was setting him up, but his voice cracked, desperate, unbelievable. As they placed him in the back of the patrol car, neighbors gathered quietly outside. Some whispered, others stared. The HOA president, the man who once ruled with authority, was now being taken away under flashing lights. From the window of the car, David looked out at Maple Ridge one last time. The lawn still gleamed, the flag still waved, the illusion still held. But behind one curtain, he saw movement, a faint silhouette watching, the same shape he'd seen under the streetlight. He blinked and it vanished again. Inside the police station, they questioned him for hours. The officers spoke of motive, opportunity, revenge. He denied everything, but his words felt empty even to himself. Finally, they left him alone in the interrogation room. The light above flickered softly, buzzing. David looked up at it, and for the first time he felt something inside him give way. He realized that it wasn't the darkness that had destroyed him, it was the obsession to control it. He closed his eyes, whispering into the silence as the lights flickered one last time. And went out. The fluorescent light above him went out with a faint pop, leaving the interrogation room in near darkness. David didn't move. He just sat there, hands clasped tightly together on the metal table, feeling the darkness settle like a living thing around him. For a few seconds, nothing happened, no sound, no movement, just the low hum of the building's generators far away. Then, from somewhere down the hall, a voice echoed faintly, sharp and hurried. Footsteps followed. Someone shouted for maintenance. But David barely heard it. Because in that silence, he realized he wasn't alone. There was someone else in the room. He could feel the presence behind him, soft, patient, waiting. His pulse thundered in his ears. Slowly, he turned. The faint light from the observation glass reflected a silhouette. A man, tall still, face hidden in shadow. "Who's there?" David's voice cracked. The figure didn't answer. It only tilted its head slightly, like a teacher waiting for a confession. David blinked and the lights flickered back on. The room was empty. The door burst open moments later. Two officers rushed in, their radios buzzing. One of them asked if he was all right, saying there'd been a brief power surge affecting half the building. David nodded numbly. He didn't mention the shadow, he didn't trust his own mind enough to. They said he could leave for now, there wasn't enough to hold him yet, not until Ethan woke up. As David walked out of the police station, the early morning air felt wrong, too cold, too sharp. The world seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. He got in his car, turned the ignition, and drove without knowing where to go. His house didn't feel safe anymore. The shadows there whispered. The phone, the lights, the windows, all of it was tainted. So instead, he drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of Maple Ridge, past the homes that once bowed to his authority. It struck him how peaceful everything looked, sprinklers ticking rhythmically, porch lights glowing faintly, a paperboy tossing folded news onto driveways, the illusion of order perfectly intact. But David knew illusions better than anyone. He parked near the community clubhouse and just sat there, staring at the building that had been the center of his power. The very place where everything had started and where, somehow, it all seemed to end. He needed answers. He needed to know who had set him up. He entered quietly through the side door, his own master key still fitting perfectly into the lock. The air inside was damp, carrying the faint scent of cleaning chemicals and rain-soaked wood. The maintenance stairwell was sealed with police tape now, but that didn't stop him. He tore through it one strip at a time. The stairwell felt colder than it should have been. The light above flickered dimly, casting uneven shadows down the narrow passage. Halfway down, something caught his eye again, the same carved letters on the wall, DH. He knelt beside them, running a trembling hand over the grooves. The cuts were shallow but deliberate, not made in panic, made carefully, purposefully. Then he noticed something else, small scratches just beneath the initials, faint but visible. Words. He leaned closer, squinting. "You turned it off." David staggered back, his breath hitched. Whoever carved this had done it before Ethan fell. A cold realization spread through him. He wasn't being haunted by Ethan, he was being haunted by his own past. And then a sound echoed above him, the creak of a door opening. He froze. "Who's there?" he called, voice trembling. No answer, only footsteps, slow and measured, descending the stairs. When the figure appeared, David's breath caught in his throat. It was Ethan. Alive, pale, bruised but standing. His left arm was bandaged, a faint mark across his forehead. For a moment, neither man spoke. The air between them was thick with the weight of everything unsaid. David's voice broke the silence first. You're supposed to be in the hospital." Ethan's eyes were calm, too calm. "I was, but you and I have unfinished business." David stumbled back. "You set me up, you." Ethan raised a hand, stopping him. "No, David, you did that yourself." The words cut deep. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze cold and unwavering. "You think I did know? You think I didn't see you that night? You cut the power to my building like a coward, thinking it would scare me into silence." David's mouth went dry. But I didn't report you," Ethan continued softly, "because I wanted to see how far you'd go to protect your illusion of control." David's heart pounded. Then why all this, the notes, the videos, the messages? Ethan tilted his head. "Because sometimes, David, justice needs to feel what fear feels like." The words hung in the air like smoke. David shook his head violently. No, you're lying, you couldn't have done it alone, someone was in my house." Ethan's expression didn't change. "You built this house of fear yourself, you taught everyone how to live in it, all I did was let the lights go out." David's knees weakened, the room seemed to tilt around him. He could hear the hum of the electrical panel behind Ethan, the same panel he'd tampered with weeks ago. You framed me," David whispered. "You used my guilt against me." Ethan took another step closer. "No, I gave your guilt a mirror." For a moment, the only sound was the steady drip of water from a leaky pipe. Then David's voice cracked, desperate. "You don't understand, I was protecting this community, I built this order without me." "Without you," Ethan interrupted quietly, "people might finally stop being afraid." David's face twisted. "You think they'll respect you, you think they'll follow you." Ethan looked past him toward the flickering light. "I don't want them to follow me, David, I just want them to be free." Something snapped inside David then, something primal and bitter. He lunged forward, grabbing Ethan by the collar, shoving him against the wall. "You don't get to take this from me," he shouted, voice echoing through the stairwell. The light above them flickered violently. For a second, the world was chaos, flashes of light, the smell of ozone, the metallic taste of fear. Then a loud crack. A spark jumped from the electrical panel, arcing through the air. Both men stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Smoke filled the stairwell. When the light steadied, Ethan was gone. David coughed, waving the smoke away, his chest heaving. "Ethan," he shouted, his voice echoed but got no reply. He ran up the stairs, burst through the door, and froze. The parking lot was empty, no footprints, no sign of anyone leaving, just rain beginning to fall again, gentle and relentless. He looked around wildly, spinning in circles. "Where are you?" But the only answer was the whisper of rain. When he finally stumbled back to his car, something was waiting on the windshield, a folded sheet of paper soaked around the edges. Inside, written in perfect handwriting, "You can't turn off what's already gone dark." No signature, no threats, just that. He sank into the driver's seat, shaking uncontrollably. His mind reeled. Had Ethan even been there? Was it another hallucination, a trick of guilt and exhaustion? He didn't know anymore. By the time he returned home, dawn was breaking again. The power had returned, every light in his house burning brightly, too brightly. It was as if the house was mocking him. He wandered through the rooms one by one, turning off switches, but they flicked back on seconds later. The refrigerator hummed, the lamps glowed, even the outdoor lights' motion sensors inactive stayed on. He unplugged them, ripped cords from walls, but the light never went out. And then, through the faint hum of electricity, he heard it. A soft voice, barely audible, echoing through the house's security intercom. "Do you remember the dark, David?" His blood turned to ice. The same voice from the recordings. He rushed to the intercom panel, ripping it from the wall. Sparks flew, but the voice didn't stop. "Every switch you flipped, every rule you made, was just to hide your fear." He backed away slowly. The voice came from all directions now, whispering from the vents, the walls, the wires. "Now everyone will see what power really costs." The lights began to flicker faster, harsher, until the entire house pulsed like a living thing. The air buzzed with static. David screamed, covering his ears, "Stop, stop." And then everything went silent again. When he opened his eyes, the house was dark, dead quiet. No light, no hum, no voice. He stood there in the center of his perfect, powerless home, surrounded by the darkness he'd once weaponized against others. For the first time, he understood it, not as control but as consequence. By morning, the police found the house in disarray. The lights still refused to turn on. David sat alone in his chair by the window, staring out at Maple Ridge as the sun rose. He didn't resist when they came for him again. He didn't speak. He just smiled faintly, whispering something they couldn't quite make out. The officers led him away, and the neighborhood returned to its quiet perfection, lawns trimmed, flags waving, sprinklers ticking. But that night, when the power grid flickered briefly across Maple Ridge, a few residents swore they saw something strange. For just a second, the lights in the clubhouse came on by themselves, though the building was locked and empty. And through the front window, they said they saw a man's silhouette, standing perfectly still in the glow, looking out over the neighborhood he once ruled. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the light went out again. And Maple Ridge slept, unaware that its perfection had always been built on the edge of darkness.